Hello and welcome to the Fed by Farmers podcast with me, Cammy Wilson.
And me, Iona Murray.
As always, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Crystalyx and Animax, for supporting the podcast, and we're going to hear a little bit more about them later in the show. We're doing things a little bit different this week. Usually Iona and I do a little introduction and a little blether, and then we get into the interview, but that's actually quite hard to schedule and sort out. So actually what we're doing is we're going to interview our guest. Today's guest is sitting here patiently waiting for our introduction.
Yes.
And then we're going to go straight into it. And then we might have a wee conclusion at the end. We'll just see, because we don't want to actually talk about her while she's still here. You know? We'll do
see
that
how
after.
it
So who is she? It is Margo McGill we have with us today. Now, Margo, I've wrote a couple of points here. You're a partner at Lockharts Law.
Yep.
And that is, your speciality is agricultural law.
That's correct.
Perfect for this podcast. But you also farm with your husband and, I was going to say lovely little kids, but
two sons.
they're absolutely bloody massive.
Yes, absolutely. 6 foot plus. Both of them,
Yes. Great breeding.
Yes,
I must say.
What can I say?
And you're milking 120 dairy cows, mostly pure Holsteins.
Yes,
couple of wee jerseys for fun.
Yes, token jerseys, but essentially pedigree Holsteins. That's Robbie's thing. He loves all that.
Yeah.
Is Robbie your son?
So Robbie, yes, he's my biggest boy potentially. I want to, he's my husband.
Yeah.
He's the biggest character. But Robbie's my husband, and I've got 2 sons, Rory and Kyle.
There we go.
Yes.
So that is the introduction, and of course, Mark, this all came off the back of really speaking with Heather.
Yes,
and I kept probing her questions about wills and succession
Yep.
things, and she was, you want to speak to a solicitor about that. So
Yes.
we mentioned your name in the podcast,
Yes,
and
indeed.
as if by magic, here you appear.
Thank you for asking me.
No, listen, it's great for us, and so much of this podcast is people in Ayrshire, obviously, because we're in Ayrshire. We know loads of people in Ayrshire, but we thought it'd be good to actually, get you in. You're well known, and you can tell us the facts, because we don't do that many facts on here. I usually waffle things that I think.
Oh wait, no you don't.
Quite well. I did say to someone, we were at the NFU conference the other day,
Yes.
and someone brought up the story about the blackface, the most influential animal ever sold, you could say, is the Scottish blackface, and the Alexander Fleming story. And I did say to the guy, don't believe everything you hear on that podcast. But we can believe anything you tell us. If you want, I've gave a little introduction there, but tell us about what it is you actually do at Lockharts Law.
Okay, so as I say, I'm a solicitor. I am an accredited specialist in agricultural law. I work with Lockharts Law, solicitors in Ayr. I've been there now for about 12 years. We're a predominantly conveyancing, commercial, sort of corporate and agricultural firm. And it's farmers that I work with on a daily basis, Cammy, buying and selling farms, dealing with servitudes, refinancing, just anything that comes across my desk that's essentially farming orientated. So I love it. It's great. I love working with the farmers. They're a unique bunch, and they've always got really interesting stories or setups. So it's a great area to be in.
Yeah, and I suppose that's the thing. It won't be the same thing day in, day out.
Changes. Changes all the time. Depends on the farming scenario. Depends who's involved in the business. Just depends. Depends what the issue is that they come to see me about. So it can be anything. Can start off just be your basics with wills or powers of attorney or a bit of inheritance tax. It just depends. But the most basic thing that everybody should have in place is a will. Very important thing to get in place, because the law doesn't even assume that your spouse, for instance, would be your executor. So if you die without a will, first thing your family have to do is they have to go to court to get your executor appointed. So your spouse would have to be appointed. So it removes so much stress for a family to have a will in place, because then it's set out exactly what the deceased wanted. So it's a very, very, very useful tool to have in place. So I can't emphasise enough the importance of having a will in place.
And then how does the court decide?
Well, you would apply to the court to nominate the person that you want. So very often it's either a spouse or a child. But you have to actually do that step. That you can't just assume that your spouse or your child would be the executor. So making a will is so important.
But what if you haven't said who you prefer, and then so the spouse and your child go to court? Who wins?
It would be the spouse, and then
whoever
the child.
has you.
Yeah.
It's like a race.
Well,
it's like a race.
Hopefully
I'm sorry. Your mum's already phoned me. You're screwed.
Well, and that's the thing. Hopefully, the family get on and they're all in agreement, and that's why, particularly if there's a situation where people don't get on, then it's so important to have your will in place. Because one big thing again with sadly the law of succession is legal rights. So again, one of the big things about preparing a will for a client is I will always check how they hold the farm and how it's all structured. So if you hold your farm as an individual, so it's in the dad's name, or maybe you could hold the farm as a partnership asset. But it's very important to clarify that at the outset, because depending on how you hold the farm can have implications. So if you do have a will, and then the will is read when somebody passes, and there's potentially a disgruntled child in the family dynamic that doesn't accept what's in the will, then they can claim their legal right in the deceased estate. So they can say, I'm ignoring what's in the will and I'll claim my legal right. And the reason that's important is because it allows them to claim obviously something which they may not have been entitled to. So you can claim a legal right in a person's movable estate as opposed to heritable estate. So heritable is, just as we were talking about, farms, houses, land. Movable is things like money, cash, sharing a partnership. So as long as you've got your will set up properly, and as long as you know how you hold your heritable assets, i.e. in your individual name, there's no problem. But sometimes people don't realise that they hold the farm in the partnership, and a share in a partnership actually can be regarded as being a movable asset and not a heritable. And the reason this is really important is because you can only claim legal rights in your movable estate. You can't claim legal rights in heritable estate, which is the houses and farms. So you shouldn't be able to claim any legal rights on the farm, provided you're set up properly, Cami. But if you're not set up properly and the farm is held in the partnership, that can give a disgruntled person the chance to come in the back door to claim a legal share. So that's why I'll say structure. The structure of how you hold your assets is one of the key things that any solicitor looking at a farming will should check.
So from obviously a lot of information. No, but that's good. Yep. That is really good. That's what we want here. But I'm hopefully going to there'll be a lot of people listening will be thinking the way I'm thinking. So are you? I know you're not saying this, but from what you're saying, then it's better if it's held solely by the person opposed to being tied up in a partnership?
Well, yes. So
in that regard, anyway.
In that regard, absolutely. But that's why the key thing is speaking to your solicitor at day dot, because you want to ascertain the structure and you want to ascertain the dynamics in the family. Because it may be you've only got one son, so it doesn't matter. And if you've got one son, then he's going to get everything, and that's going to be fine. But if you've got several children and potentially, you've got two boys coming into the partnership, and you've maybe got other family that aren't involved in the farming partnership. Sometimes maybe if the relationship's not as good with the ones that aren't involved in the farming partnership, you want to make sure that you're clear, that you know how your assets are going to transfer on in terms of the next generation. So you need to be clear as to how they're held. So if there's no risks, if it's the Waltons and everybody gets on really well and there's no concerns.
The Murrays.
If it's the Murrays and there's no issues.
Good night, John Boy.
And Mary Ellen, she'd be Mary Ellen. So if it's that scenario, then you're grand, and it's just a case of knowing that. But the issue is sometimes where you maybe don't have that fortunate scenario where everybody gets on so well. So it's very important to check how the farm is structured and to make sure that you understand how it's held and to understand what your risks are. If there is any potential legal rights claims that could come out the woodwork at a later date, you're as well to know that, and therefore, in answer to your question, Cami, yes, you would make sure then that the farm is held specifically in the individual person's name rather than being held as a partnership asset.
That's
but it depends on your circumstances, and that's what I can't emphasise enough. But circumstance by circumstance, case by case. Of
course. But you'd think like most farms would probably be in a partnership,
husband
and wife.
Yeah, a lot of people
at the very
trade.
least.
Yeah, a lot of people trade in a partnership, and typically.
So is that different than the farm being held in a partnership?
So that's your legal ownership. So the legal
so
ownership
is
who owns it, the title deed, Cammy.
Okay.
Who owns the title, the legal title to that property?
Yes.
Which is one area versus your actual business, how you trade.
Yes.
So your capital in any farming partnership would usually be your stock, machinery, and whatever cash you have in the bank. And I would usually say that your heritable assets, the farm, is off balance sheet, is off the partnership, because then you know exactly who holds it.
Who owns it, right?
And that potentially reduces any risk, and you would make that very clear in your partnership agreement.
Right. Well, in that case, generally speaking, it probably is held in one name. Most farms, I would say.
But typically back in the day, it depends on your situation. Quite a lot of people would maybe have put the farm into the partnership to give you a good, robust balance sheet. If you're going to the bank to say, we want to borrow money, we want to do X and Y, we want to buy the farm next door. So you want a very robust balance sheet. But as I say, there's more than one way to do that, and that's why you can have the farm held by the individuals and still have a very robust, partnership. So it's just making sure that people understand, the legal title, and then you've actually got your trading vehicle. So whether you're a sole trader, a partnership, or a company.
Limited
Some people
company.
like to
Yep.
trade as a company. There's tax advantages. So it's just understanding, knowing how you're set up and making sure that setup is right for you.
No, that's interesting.
Crystalyx Extra High Energy feed blocks have been providing high energy supplementation to ewes, lambs and rams in the UK since 1978. Packed full of protein, vitamins, minerals and trace elements, Crystalyx Extra High Energy has been proven to increase live lamb numbers and improve lamb daily live weight gain at a cost of only 4 to 7 pence per ewe per day. To view the full Crystalyx range and find your nearest stockist, visit crystalyx-global.com.
I think a lot of folk will be listening to that already going, how's the farm set
yeah.
up?
Yeah.
And this is what this is all about, is making
Yeah.
people think and hopefully helping a lot of people.
Yep.
So let's put a wee scenario to you then. As I am I don't have a will. Okay.
Cammy,
I know.
shame on you.
In fairness, like, well, actually I would say I don't have much to inherit, but I have,
But your kids
What?
even...
we've
Cammy,
got
It would be
1100
so
ewes.
messy if you
Yeah.
died.
But how would it?
see,
Lizzie would just get everything.
but Lizzie's not even assumed to be an executor. I mean, you're better to have a will, Cammy.
Oh, I will.
Yeah.
Pun
Uh-huh.
intended.
So what would happen if
After
Cammy
this.
died?
But let's do the scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so give me
Apart
your
from a
scenario.
lot of tears around the table,
Yes, I
you know.
it's devastation.
Yeah, I imagine
Goes without saying.
it would be something similar to, you know, like folk lining the streets and all that. And
yeah,
I can
that's
imagine.
that's all been and gone, and now we're talking money.
Yes, okay, yeah. Aye, you're in the ground.
Yes.
You're dead. An honest man here lies at rest. Blah blah blah. Right.
Bless Jason.
Yes. Bless Jason. Our father. So right, I'm dead. I'm in the ground. Now the fight begins.
And you've got no will. Well,
Yep.
the law. So
We
so
have a Sassenach claiming rights to my money. She's came from Devon.
Oh gosh.
She's had a couple of kids. She's had 3 kids by me, and now she thinks she gets all the money.
Oh, gosh.
Is that fair?
You were never married though, Cammy. Or
No.
were you married?
No, I'm still not sure. I'm still thinking about
So
it.
if you were-
She
if
might
you
be
were
the
married-
one.
if
She
you were-
might be the one, but I'm just I'm not sure.
Well, if this previous lady, if you were married, then she's automatically got rights. If you never divorced her.
Oh,
and
you
you're
actually
married,
meaning I have actually been married?
Oh,
Oh,
right.
this is getting worrying now.
Oh, no, I was going to say, oh, you mean, oh, right, okay.
I was joking about Lizzie.
Oh, right, okay, sorry.
No, it was a joke. Like, I don't know if she's the one, you know, but yeah, no. Yeah, that's Lizzie I'm talking about.
But so you're not married then?
No,
Oh,
it's
right, okay.
a lot of sinning happening,
Oh.
let me tell you. But especially now the TV's broke, that's another story. But previously, I have been married.
Ah, right, okay.
Yeah,
so
but
you divorced? Are you properly
Divorced,
divorced?
total, very modern, very modern.
Yes, that's...
So I've been married and divorced.
Right, as long as you're divorced, that's fine. So wife
Okay.
number 1 has no claim whatsoever.
That's good.
That's the main thing. As long as you're categorically divorced, that is a hugely important point. So as
Yeah.
long as you're divorced, she's got no claim whatsoever.
Ideal.
But in terms of Lizzie's claim, then it would be dealt with in accordance with the law of intestacy. So the law sets down how your the next generation and your spouse would inherit your assets. So it's set down, it's ordered in terms of what they get. So Lizzie would get, like, you know, the home and up to a certain value in money type thing, and then
We rent a
her
house.
prior rights. So she would get her prior rights potentially. But as you're not married, yes, it's maybe not just as straightforward as if you were married.
We
But-
rent our house as well, so it's like she's on to plums.
But
Also gets a bit of the whole rent to pay.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions. What happened if somebody died and they had loads and loads of debt and nobody wanted to claim?
Well, the person that's got the debt would obviously have to raise that against that, and would have to bring a decree to get, to find. They would need to find out who was the representative in the next of kin, etc. So,
But with all those things, if there is a lot of debt, the solicitor pays the debt first before MD gets any money.
So,
Oh,
in your
right,
will,
The
or-
debt's all
Okay.
paid
Yeah.
before MD gets it. So it wouldn't be a case of if MD's taken it or not. It'd be a case of
It's the
But
same
what
with
if they had
tax.
no money and their debt outweighed the
That's
money
a
they
bit like
had?
there's it's a bit like saying you can't get the breeks off Highlander and if there's no money, there's nothing to get. So basically, they just
The debts are wiped.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
the debts aren't inherited. Like your
Yeah,
wife
that's what I
doesn't.
was-
Well, if you were
Oh,
took,
if it's
it depends.
50-50
Well,
partnership,
yes. So
yes,
if you
of
took,
course.
it depends how you took the debt. If you
Yep.
took the debt in your joint names, or if it was a partnership debt, well, within a partnership, the debt is joint and several. So that means you've got joint and several liability. So
Yep.
effectively, it means that if both of you sign up and you've got £1 and your other half's got £1 million, and that million's exhausted, then they potentially can come back against you for the debt just as well as they could come back against your partner. So if you've got a house in your own right, then your house in your own right is on the line for that debt because it's a partnership debt where you've got joint and several liability. So that's why
Okay.
you need to be clear just in terms of what you're signing up to at the outset, and again what vehicle you're taking the debt's name in. What name the debt is secured in.
So you said there about Lizzie would get the things like the house and things like that. What happens with the rest of it? Would she get the sheep as well?
Well, we'll actually move.
She's actually the only one that knows where they all are. So
handy.
good luck to anyone trying to get them off her. They're in 20 different holdings. Good luck.
Yeah, that's handy, Cam.
Yeah.
No, obviously there would be an itinerary worked out in terms of what you essentially had, and then I think she would raise a claim to the estate again because she's not married. If you're married, she's got an automatic entitlement in terms of prior rights, but when you're not married, they've got to kind of raise a claim. So yeah, it's the same with inheritance tax. If you're leaving everything to your spouse, there's an automatic exemption. So everything that in a will a husband leaves to a wife is completely exempt from inheritance tax.
Is it?
Yes, one of the few benefits of being married.
That is a massive benefit.
Yeah. So if you have a will, again, make a will, guys. That's what I'm saying. Make a will.
Absolutely, yeah.
And sadly, you were to pass, then everything that is left between spouses on death is exempt from inheritance tax. Just, so you know.
Interesting.
Because
That is
otherwise,
interesting.
your nil rate band, as we talk about, for an individual is 325,000. So typically, anybody's estate would need to be over £325,000 before you're subject to tax. So if you're just an ordinary individual, unmarried, and you die, the first thing your solicitor does is liaise with your executors and they work out the value of your estate. So you work out everything that person had, a cheery chat, everything that person had as at the date of death. And then if it's over £325,000, then you're subject to tax at 40%. But there are exemptions. So if you're a married couple and you leave everything to your spouse, doesn't matter if you're 325,000 or 3.25 million, you leave it all to your spouse, it's exempt from inheritance tax. And for farms, there's an exemption called agricultural property relief. So you can potentially get a farm down to the next generation without suffering inheritance tax if you tick the boxes for
If you're actively
APR.
farming it, is that
If you're
correct?
actively farming, Cammy, that's correct, 100%.
Okay. But what, and we covered this. I'll tell you one thing I'm going to say. What can you say what your hourly rate is? Is it open? Is it secret?
No, it's not. My terms of business are quite clear. I think it's about £250 an hour, which is very cheap compared to a lot of my competitors in Glasgow and Edinburgh.
Well,
anyway.
I think that's a bar. Can I just say, I think that's good value because you give so much information so fast.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I
That's
no, but it's
a
great.
negative I've had for years. I
no, it's
speak
like-
too quickly,
No,
so just tell me to
It's like
slow
folk are
down.
going to listen to this, like saying, like, I can't believe I found somebody that speaks faster than Cammy. In fact, we had Raymond Kennedy last week. Raymond Kennedy, who speaks fast, but you speak very clear. But I'm actually thinking at £250 an hour, I'd want you to speak as fast as possible.
Yeah, you would just say nothing.
Just give me the information. I'm like, God, that's 10 minutes.
I
What's
tend
that?
to do a lot of stuff in like an agreed fee estimate type thing. So you tell me at the outset what you want me to do, and I'll agree a fee with you there and then that's reasonable, and obviously depends on what I'm
Farmers
doing for
love
you.
that.
So farmers love that.
Farmers
love a deal.
love
Tell
that.
me, you know what,
They
totally,
know
the
what they're
spade is
paying.
spade. They know what they're paying. They can budget for
Plus,
that.
it means you're
and it's
not
fine.
dragging things on.
Oh, totally. I know. Well, I'm a farmer's daughter, Cammy. I know what it's like. You know, you've got to talk about the bottom line.
Absolutely tight. Working with the tightest customers you could be working
Oh,
with.
but they're a rare breed, and that's why I love them. That's great.
But see with the criminal law. I know you don't do
I
criminal
don't do
law.
criminal,
but
yeah. Thankfully.
would you know? You maybe know some folk that do it. Do you know?
Yeah,
'Cause
no.
I always thought, like when I was in the police, right? Legal aid. Like there must be a lot of dragging their heels and dragging things out because of legal aid. Is there not?
Oh, legal aid has taken a complete bashing over the last number of years. It's now the legal aid rates have been completely reduced. So many people have gone out of business because of legal aid. Now you basically don't get legal aid for nearly as much as you used to do, which obviously is not good for the individual either because you don't have the same access to justice. But you could have argued that back in the day, legal aid was you could make as much out of it as you potentially tried. But I mean, it depended on the case that you had, but legal aid has taken a real bashing over the last few years, Cammy. There's loads of people now that previously did legal aid that don't do it anymore. I mean, again, my knowledge of it is very scant.
Yeah, no, but you'll hear
property.
yeah.
But yes, I hear the chat.
You read it in FT or something like that.
Well,
We said try to sound cool. But yeah, okay, that's interesting because now it used to be like we would deal with shoplifting. And you'd have CCTV of the shoplifting. The security guard is the witness, seeing him take it and put it in his jacket, and he'd plead not guilty all the way to take it to a trial.
Yeah,
and
I
it's
know.
like,
how could you possibly do that? I know.
like why is that money being spent on legal aid for that? You know, to go when
That's their entitlement. It's this you get entitlement for innocent until proven guilty. It's the fundamental pillars of the criminal
It's
justice
important.
system.
It's very
that
important.
Anybody that is any charges have been brought against, they've got a fundamental human right that they're allowed to be defended. So it's all kind of roundabouts, crouched in that, rather than thinking about the money side of it. It's
absolutely.
Any
And
individual
I
has a
agree
right
with
to
that.
fair representation. Is the kind
Yeah.
of idea behind it.
Yeah, no, and that's fair enough. So yeah, you're getting fantastic information in there.
Sorry,
like,
information overload, Cammy. So
No,
feel
no,
free to
do you know
put me in
what's-
slow-mo
I usually
when you're
think-
playing me back.
I usually think folk usually listen to podcasts at 1.2, but they listen to us at 0.8. So I sound a lot like this. I don't just laugh. It's like so sorry, I totally interrupted chain of thoughts there. We were talking about wills. I'm going to do. Here's a question. Now, my solicitor told me this one time. This is a solicitor that did a property for me, that they would do a will for free.
Yeah, some people do that. It just depends what your marketing
But
tack is.
you say some people. You
if
charge
I'm buying
for
a
it.
house, well, it depends. See, as a lot of the wills we do require quite a bit of
Complex.
advice. So I mean, it's not just a case of back in the day when I first joined Lockharts, one of the older partners did that. Like if you bought a house for somebody, you would automatically give them a will, and I think that's potentially actually quite a good thing to do.
Yeah.
But the problem is, a lot of the wills I do are for my established farming clients, so it involves a meeting, couple of meetings. You've got to go through their titles, got to have a bit of an understanding of the family setup, the family dynamic, and it's not just something I could do in half an hour off the bat. I need a bit more time
But
and
is it
effort.
is it not a bit of an investment? Because
Yes, in terms of when you're dealing with an executory, Cammy.
yeah. So like if you hold the will, you'll be the one that.
Yeah, then gets to administer the estate.
Yeah, so you get to administer the invoice at the end.
Well, no, absolutely. So yes, executories can be an area where potentially you do make quite a bit of money. I mean, there's no getting away from that. Executives are your old school. Sadly, it's a bit thing we all have in common: death and tax. You know what I mean? So it's a very constant area of business because people always die, whereas people are not always buying houses or buying farms, or it all depends on the market.
Yep.
But sadly, death is something that happens regardless
probably
of
more
what's
and
going
more
on.
is-
So that's why solicitors always say that executives are a very core, very substantial part of your business, because sadly, there's always somebody dying, unfortunately.
And see, so one of your biggest points is everybody should have a will.
Yes.
Is there anything more specific, like within that will, that makes things easier or that are smart decisions to make?
Well, yes, it's just about understanding your own setup, Iona, and understanding what assets you have and how you want to leave things, and taking that advice at an early stage. So that, as I say, the basic one is just the structuring and understanding how you own things, because that's why people very often come a bit like yourself, Cammy, and thinking, not clear in terms of the legal ownership of the asset versus their trading vehicle, and kind of just like marry it all into one when it is very distinct and very separate. So very often the main fundamental thing that comes out of any of my first meetings about wills is just clarification with the client as to exactly how they're set up, how they own the farm and how they trade and who's in the business. And also is good for trigger points for maybe bringing in the younger generation or one or two of the younger generation, a son, for instance, into the partnership. That's always a good trigger for having that discussion as well. So where you are with your business and how you want to take it forward come very, most of the time are very much involved with your will discussion. So you're having a will, you're thinking about your partnership, your business, how you're going forward. And also the other thing that comes off the back of the will as well is a power of attorney. The two go hand in hand. So your power of attorney document is the document you would put in place to authorise somebody to act on your behalf during your life when you're still here, but you're maybe not able to.
Dementia or something like that.
Exactly,
Alzheimer's,
Cammy. So if you've got something, sadly, one of these conditions,
very common.
Sadly becoming
Probably
more
more
common.
Farmers.
Well,
do we see it more? Do you know, I listened to a podcast talking about, it was Matthew Walker, who's a sleep specialist. Great thing. But he's actually like a brain genius.
Do you sleep well?
Amazing. Yeah, I'm like, boom, asleep. Oh, great.
That's typical farmer. You can sleep on the edge of a knife.
Clear conscience, try it. Yeah, no, I am just like boom, asleep, and just don't sleep long enough is the problem. And that's part of his thing. He says people that don't get enough sleep, so he has a stat, it's like if you get less than 7 hours sleep a night, 5 nights out of 7, you are 50% more, this is all made up, but 50% more likely to get Alzheimer's and things like that. So I always think about dairy farmers.
Well, I was going to say 7
Or
hours
shift workers.
One
Shift work, another reason, that was killing me. See what in the police? See once I turned 30,
shift, night shift.
See before I was 30, I was invincible. And then see when I turned 30, a night shift crippled me. Like it was like being hungover. Like see coming out of night shift, it was like you'd been on the piss for 4 days, and I couldn't recover.
Oh, God,
I was just terrible.
Yeah,
Whereas before 30, I could do night shift and go shear sheep all day.
But not good for you.
Yeah, I was going to say
sleep is so
the
important.
random sleep patterns.
And females, we need more sleep than men.
Oh,
is that
By
right?
2 hours, yep.
Is that right?
Yeah.
2 hours more a night?
2 hours more a night.
I'm surprised at that, because obviously women typically are the one in the family that, when you have kids, that you then have a very broken sleep pattern.
Yeah.
when
Yeah,
you're dealing with your
that's
kids.
true.
I'm surprised at that,
Yeah.
because you can get by in a good 3 or 4 hours back in the day when the boys were wee, and then off to work the next day.
Well, funny you say getting by in a good 3. Like so this guy did. It's actually with Joe Rogan, the interview, and I would say it's probably the best podcast I've ever listened to, and it's Matthew Walker with Joe Rogan. He actually has his own podcast, but it's a bit boring because he drags it all out. With Joe Rogan, he gets into the real key points of sleep, and like see after you listen to that, like it actually had a big impact on me working a road out the police. Because after listening to that, I was like, I need to get out of here.
Oh, so this is ages ago you listened
Oh
to
yeah,
this?
oh, this is an old podcast. Like
Right,
this
okay.
is before Joe Rogan was Spotify. This was a while ago. But it is mind blowing how bad it is for you if you're not getting sleep.
Yeah.
Like shockingly bad. And I always think about dairy farmers.
Oh, I know, I was going to say, because Robbie, my other half, is one of the worst for that. His sleep pattern's horrendous because obviously we've got robots. So he will check the cows, the late milkers, as they call them, the lates, because not all cows voluntarily go to the robot. Some,
Yeah.
you know, for whatever reason, if they're just in their teat placement, they can't go on their own. They've got to assist the robot to place the lasers. So Robbie he's out first thing in the morning, he's out at lunchtime, and then at night as well. So he'll go out every night at 10 o'clock to check everything, and very often can be out for an hour or two and not back in till later on. So he's got a very broken sleep pattern.
Yeah.
So, but that's dairy farming for you. I mean, everybody that's milking cows in some description, Cammy, will be up and down regularly. So it's not good for you.
No, like it really, really isn't. And that's why, you know, always give a shout out to dairy farmers, because it's
absolutely.
I always say the sheep boys and girls are the hardest workers physically. But see that the fact you have to always be there, the hours you
it's
do.
relentless.
Dairy farming is like another level.
Yeah, that's so tying. That's like you've got to have somebody there. If you're in,
Like my sheep,
or whether it's parlour, you've got to be there morning and night.
Now you check them once a week. They're all dozed. They've plenty of grass.
They're
Check them
fine.
once a week. They're fine. They're not big enough to start cowping yet. Once a week, you're fine. But dairy cows, even just cattle and sheds, I think are unbelievably tying. But so that always made me think after that podcast about dairy farmers and about, I wonder if there is a stat. NFU, that's one for you guys to look into. Is there more cases of Alzheimer's and dementia in dairy farmers?
But it's staff. I mean, that's
And
very
staff
interesting.
and dairymen and women.
That's one of the big things though in dairy farming just now is it's so difficult to get staff, you know what I mean, to get good staff, and that's why therefore the onus reverts back to the owner themselves, having to milk the cows and do all the feeding and stuff, and it because it's so tying, and it is so difficult to get good staff for various reasons, and that's therefore it's difficult for them to get out the cycle of sleep.
And that is what you would say is your big win with robots, is that although Robbie's out there,
so that is your big win with robots.
late at night,
they're always milking the cows. They're great
does it
from a
himself.
welfare perspective. They're fantastic. The cows all took to them very, very well. So
Should we maybe just do a wee bit on the robots just for people who don't?
what we're talking about. Just tell us a bit about how the robots work.
So it's just as it suggests. So you have a robotic milking machine essentially that milks the cows. So rather than bringing the cows into a parlour morning and night where you physically will put the milking machines on yourself and physically milk the cows yourself, and you've got like somebody in the parlour doing that, with a robotic milking setup, then the cows effectively will go to milk themselves. So when they feel the need, they can go, and that's again one of the great welfare things of robots, so that when the minute a cow feels that it's needing to go and get milked, it can. And it basically goes into the robotic milking machine. It's got a collar, etc. The computer recognises it straight away, knows the cow. They can be fed while in the robot. And as I say, the lasers and the electronic milking arm part of the robot just, does it all mechanically, electronically. So there's no need for any human involvement if you don't need to. But as I say, you can. I mean, you give it my other
Still
halves.
the odd awkward cow and stuff.
Yeah, the odd awkward cow that even when they're just freshly calved, or if you've got a young heifer and the laser that doesn't reach properly, sometimes have to set the new profile for that cow if it's not been in the robot before. You have to milk it into the robot for the first time so that the laser readjusts to identify that cow's teat placement. You do require to assist the robot from the start, typically once a cow's just calved, especially if it's just young heifers. But after that, if they're good robot cows, they will then just merely get used to the drill, and they like getting into the robot because they know they'll get fed. In fact, some of them are quite cheeky. They'll go round and round, think this is great, and that's why they have their collar, so the robot thinks, nah, you were actually just in here 10 minutes ago.
Kick the gate open and straight back out.
And within the system, is there a way to track who's been in and out?
Oh yeah, so that's their collar. So their collar, the computer knows when they were last in and out.
So
and it's really good for the animal health as well, because it tells their temperature, whether they're susceptible to any, illnesses or whatever. If they've got a raised temperature, they say, the cow's more likely to be potentially have some kind of mastitis or
and you just jag in advance.
And then you just jag in advance. So it's really good for cow health as well. So,
very much so. And am I right in saying you just get a text to your phone if something's not come in?
So
cow 84 hasn't been in today. Where
is she?
happened to farming?
You get
a phone call from the robot. Yes. So our first robot was called Manuel because it came from Spain. So it's like obviously always get Manuel on speed dial. It's like, what's Manuel looking for now? But so it's the technology's fab, and that's why with two boys that are so interested in farming, that's why I love all that, because everything at school is iPads, computers. It's all paperless. They've got them onto the screens from like early doors in primary now. So the robotic stuff is really, really good because the boys are really interested in that and they're keen, you know, to work with the robots when they've had that kind of exposure at school. So
Plus, it gives them more time for their sheep.
oh God, they're 10 sheep.
I missed in the
my
introduction,
God.
actually. Margo's also a sheep farmer now.
Reluctantly, but yeah.
Did I get full credit for that? I
Yeah,
want full
you get
credit.
absolutely 100% credit for that.
There we
Cameron.
go.
What's the story?
We're needing to get
Just
you in
in
for
the
the
sheep game,
lambing.
just encouraging the youngsters
Yes.
into sheep.
So what age are your sons?
So Rory is 18 and he's doing agriculture at the Barony, and
Right.
Kyle is 14 and he's the one that now has the complete sheep fetish thanks
Love
to
it.
Cammy. All
Love it.
thanks to Cammy. So
Love
we've
it.
got 10 pedigree Texels thanks to him.
So, well, that's the only thing. Listen, I started with 10 pedigree Texels and I learned my lesson.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, early doors with a lamb.
What I would say is I didn't have the grazing that your Texels will have, so I'm sure they'll be absolutely fine. I was trying to put pedigree Texels on a wee rough bit of ground. It just did not work. But
I don't
I'm
know.
sure you'll be fine. Plus, you'll have the vet on speed dial anyway, being a dairy farm, so they can cut
Yes,
the
we're
lambs
very
out
good.
for you. You don't
I
need to
know.
worry.
Oh God, yes.
So no, I think that covers the robots. And what we'll do for anyone watching on YouTube, this whole podcast is available on YouTube. If you're listening to us, we'll put some videos on YouTube as you're speaking there.
Oh,
for
great.
be able to see
Yeah,
the robots in work. I'll get Robbie to send me a couple.
And
Perfect.
has it freed Robbie up a bit? I know you're saying he still goes out a lot, but that's one thing I feel for dairy farmers and their wives as well, is that it is so tying. Whereas
Yeah.
do you feel that things have changed?
Well, yes, things have changed in that you're more flexible in your day. So you're not rigidly there for 3 hours in the morning for a milking and 3 hours at night. So you have more flexibility, but you still do need to have, it's more animal husbandry. You're in the shed a lot, although you're not physically having a designated milking time. You're still in the shed, you're still feeding the calves, you're still feeding them all, because dairy cows go through a huge ration on a daily basis. So you've still got to, he's got to do all the feeds, etc.
They'll have a wee side bin, do they, that they can get a top-up feed? Some of them have that.
Oh yeah, so they get fed in the robot, but yeah, obviously they've got ad lib, like silage. You said, so they get their TMR
they don't
ration,
have
can't
another, like at Yorkshire Show, they have a robot set up at Yorkshire Show. Don't know if you've ever been. It's really amazing. A dairy set up in the middle of the show.
Yes,
very,
that's
very
fab.
good. And it's Laylee that do it, but they have like a little bit that the cow can walk in that they aren't getting milked. It's just a feed station. It must be for your high yielders
Right, okay.
to get a wee top-up feed. Do you have that in yours?
Well, we've got Robbie's sort of show pen, if you like. They're the special ones. They got everything under the sun. I think that. Oh man, they're
'Cause
very
yes,
special.
We won't go too much into the pedigree side of things because maybe that's one for Robbie to talk about.
Absolutely.
Because he's mad for it, of course. But they do very well in the Holstein, or you do very well in the Holstein.
Oh well, he tries. He tries his best. Sometimes you stand first, sometimes you stand last. It's just the joys of showing camera. You take the good with the bad. But yeah, he very much enjoys it, and he gets the odd certificate here and there. So yes, he's fortunate. Yep.
We are going to get more dairy farmers on because we have went quite sheep. Obviously, we are sheep farmers.
Which is,
So we are going to get more dairy on, and we'll get more into that. But I think for every person that likes, I find, and you'll maybe find this as well, for every person that thinks robots are great, there's another that thinks they're terrible.
Yeah. No, I can understand
Do you know
that
what I mean?
because they have very much, it's like everything else, they've got pros and cons.
Yeah.
So as I say, Robbie is cow daft, and I say that, completely unequivocally, he'd agree with me, and therefore he doesn't mind being outside 24/7, what's not to like. He's with his cows, that's what he enjoys. Whereas I could understand that, the attractiveness of a parlour to me is that you do have a designated milking in the morning and at night, and then essentially it is potentially easier sometimes just, to switch off from it.
That's it.
Done,
You've
milk
got
is
your
done,
got structure.
done, and that's it.
Yeah.
Whereas, the robots, you can dip in and out of it as much as you want, which sometimes is, it's a good thing as well as a bad thing. It depends where you come from on it. So yeah, every sort of farming, strategy, it's got its pros and cons, and you've got to sit down and work out what's good for you and what suits your family set up as well in terms of the workforce. I mean, at the minute, Robbie's got 2 boys he can boss about, be there all the time, you know what I mean? No, you're not going out, you're working, we're off.
That investment's starting to really pay off.
Absolutely.
Took a while.
Exactly.
It took a while. But yeah, I cannot wait to tell you.
Absolutely. Child labour.
Cannot wait. I might be able to hold on long enough. But I think it's interesting because it's probably going to be quite rare. I'm not saying we won't, but it's been quite rare to actually get I always hate saying the wife of a dairy farmer in because I've no doubt your partner's in the business and it's your business together.
Yeah.
But it must be one of the hardest things in terms of a relationship is dairy farming.
Well, I mean, it is very challenging, but again, I'm not your stereotypical
Because of the
farmer's
robots and
wife
stuff.
and
Oh,
stuff.
I know,
You what I
and
mean?
you're
So I'm working
independent.
full-time, I've got
Absolutely.
my own business.
You probably
I'm
make more
off.
money. In fact, well, no, dairy farming.
I was going to say dairy. No, I was going to say it's one tax dodge and another. No, farming. That's like you make it and you spend it immediately. I mean, that's the thing. You know, you get the
That's
milk, you
different.
spend it,
You've
know
no
what I mean?
costs. Yours is all profit. Well, it's not all profit, but you know what I mean? It's all your wage. It's your
money.
wage.
Yeah,
Whereas
well,
in the farm, any money that comes in, it's like, right, we need to buy this, we need to put a new shed up,
Well,
we
absolutely.
need to
So
improve
by
the,
legal
fix the robot.
Oh, totally, Cam. So
Aye.
the legal business side of things, you know, you make a salary or you make your money and that's it. You know, you can have reasonably from one year to the next can be reasonably stable. But that's the really challenging bit about farming. And you joke, you know, it was a year and a half ago, dairy farmers had a good spell, you know what I mean? And that was fantastic. But actually, dairy farming has had a really challenging, you know, several years, especially prior to that when the milk price was really, really low and it put so many dairy farmers out of business. And I think we're less than 1,000, well less than 1,000 dairy farmers in Scotland now, which actually is a travesty. And although when it's good, but the amount of bills and the amount of businesses that effectively, you know, you have to pay off the back of dairy farming is great because it's great for the agricultural community in terms of the number of businesses that feed off of dairy farming. But see, actually, dairy farming is so susceptible to the milk price and just a few pence can be the difference between making, you know, a bit of money or losing thousands. So
it's always incredible.
You're so highly invested. That's the thing. You know what I mean? It is a challenging business.
Yeah, and Iona and I were at the NFU conference a week ago, and Hamza Yusuf spoke, and he was talking about making. He said a comment, something like he actually spoke fairly well, to be fair to him, and he made a comment about making farming more efficient or efficiencies in farming, something along that regard. And Martin Kennedy, NFU president. I rate Martin really, really highly. I think he's absolutely brilliant. And he made a great comment direct to him after it, saying, you mentioned there, now I'm paraphrasing here, I actually have it recorded and we'll play it rather than what I'm about to say.
A couple of points I'd like to bring up, and you termed some farmers, you know, the inefficiencies in agriculture, and it's quite a sore one to take sometimes from a farming business, because the reality is there's not that many farming businesses that are still functioning that are inefficient, because the challenges that are on agriculture and the margins that are so low, it's very challenging to be sustainable when you're inefficient. So agriculture has moved on and adapted for a long, long time.
Like if a dairy farm is not efficient, it's over.
Absolutely. And then, well, as I say, I joke about child labour, but you know, our labour essentially is Robbie and his you know, still Sheila. She was the one who helps with the calves. That's Robbie's mum, and like the boys. You know what I mean? So it can be challenging. I mean, to get the staff in the first place, but if you do get good staff, that's another big cost in terms of your business plan for your business. So. It's
well, I was speaking to a farmer recently, an Ayrshire farmer, and the dairyman, I believe, was on about 45,000 plus a house.
Oh yeah.
Oh, wow.
Plus all the council tax paid, all the Wi-Fi, heating, electricity.
Oh, it's great. They can get a great package, but it's still
I mean, that's
really
a
hard.
60. That's a 60 grand package.
Yep.
To milk cows. Now, I know there's more to it than that. You know, you need to have your wits about. But even with bulling and stuff, there's collars on them. There was collars on them to tell when they're bulling and that. So, all right, picking up a bit of lameness and stuff, but all routine trimming. It was a great job. And the equivalent of 60 grand a year. And it was like, you know, a young lad doing it.
Yeah.
But you've got to try and do that to try and make it an attractive package for somebody to
Because-
come.
Oh, I wouldn't do
you know
it.
what I mean? In terms of to get somebody to work those hours and to work that length of
Yep.
day. In
I wouldn't
terms
do it
of
for 60 grand.
Well, you know what I mean? It's difficult.
That's what I'm saying. I wouldn't.
And see if your milk price goes through the roof, through the floors, it has done in the
He
past.
still needs paid.
Well,
Yeah.
See, that's why it is a challenging industry, and that's why the best thing in dairy is if you can get an affiliated contract. You know, you get a contract with Marks and
cost
Spencer's
tracker.
or Sainsbury's or whatever, so you tend to get more money for your milk, which is great.
Okay.
But you have lots of targets then in terms of, you know, carbon footprint, etc. when you do have an affiliated contract. So, but it's still great to get a contract of that nature because it gives you more security from an income perspective, which is what you want as a farmer. You know, you want to know that you're getting X pounds.
Oh, it's absolutely. Especially dairy when you have so many bills to pay.
Overheads, yes, that's the big
Sheep
thing.
is quite easy in that regard. Like our overheads are probably the smallest of all farming,
indeed,
I would
indeed.
argue. And the land prices are very, very good at the moment. Touch
Don't
wood.
say that out loud, can we?
touch wood. So just while we touch on it as well, I think I'm always interested in these things. Who's your milk contract with?
We're First Milk.
First Milk, are they a good one?
Yeah, no, we're just general First Milk. We don't have a special contract. Like you can be, if you're within First Milk, you can have an affiliated contract with, say, Nestle. But we're just general First Milk members.
Have you always been with First Milk?
No, when we initially started milking, we were with U-Tree because U-Tree were very susceptible of, we were quite, small. We started initially with 30 cows and it was very difficult to get one of maybe the bigger buyers to take us on because we didn't maybe have the sufficient volume of milk. But I have to say U-Tree were very, very supportive of us when we first started.
Okay.
And yeah, they were great initially.
Interesting. No, it was good. So we went on great talking about that dairy stuff there, but we did not confirm who gets my sheep when I die.
Just make a will, Cammy. I'll make a will. It makes it so much easier.
Yeah,
I was going to say, if N comes from this, make a will, because there's nothing certain otherwise.
We're going to do it.
Yes,
we're going to do it. I'll get you to do it for me.
Yes.
I'll pay you to do
and
it, of
power
course.
Attorney.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, no.
Pay you.
I would just be honoured to do it, Cammy.
Stop it. Stop it. Aye, I think, listen, squeeze. See, once I die, take as much you want for yourself. Like, don't leave it to the boys.
Witnesses to this.
Aye, make those boys of mine work for it, I tell you. So in terms of that, though, like basically, surely, just so I'm a wee bit at ease, surely everything would go to Lizzie in terms of the fact that, it's all just it's all just assets. There's no fixed.
Well, again, it depends
equipment.
what you have, and
There's no farm. There's no everything. Just a cash.
Well, it potentially would be utilised just in terms of what goes to Lizzie. But your kids would have a claim as well. It just depends what you've got. There's an ordering.
Okay.
Well,
either or, I'm quite happy. They can fight it.
I was going to
That's
say
fine.
that. I think as long as it's a scenario like yours and everybody gets on and it's like mum and two kids, you should be fine.
As long as the
But what
taxman's
about
not
other
getting
people? Like, what about if Cammie's mum came in or Cammie's sister?
Well, see that if you're a sister,
Not a
so I
sister,
know.
surely.
So if you were a partner in the business, you see, in the farm, you owned a farm and the farm had the business and you didn't leave a will, that's, it could be tricky, Cammy. So, but for you, just make a nice, simple will and it'll be ideal.
No, but you have got me thinking as well about this inheritance tax thing. Like, I will probably need to get married at some point, whether I'm sure or not. I think I'll just need to do it.
You've done it before, didn't you?
I've rushed into it before. I mean,
Gosh,
do you know what I mean? See, once you've done it once, like...
You're so romantic. I'm hoping there'll be something about and Wednesday night is like Valentine's, Cammy.
So I'll be doing it on one knee, going, Lizzie, I've worked out the value of the sheep, and it's 380,000. It's 360, but if you were to sell the Tapari, you'd be over. And I don't want to be paying any inheritance tax. Will you marry me? That's my wee speech practice. All right, this will be out after Valentine's.
I was going to say,
I might have done it.
Make it just a
for
wee
the
bit more
post.
romantic.
Yeah,
I know,
yeah.
I was going to say, I done a wee bit, kind of maybe I like you a wee bit in there as well.
In fact, I've just decided in my head that see when the day comes, that's what the caption's going to be. That's the inheritance tax sorted. When the day comes, we'll do that. So no, that's it. Now I had wrote down here, obviously will's your thing, and obviously I'm quite interested in tenancies.
Yep.
I know you alluded earlier that perhaps that's not your particular area of expertise. Is that fair to say? Or
It depends.
you're still an expert, but
Well, no, I'm an agricultural sort of specialist, but tenancies...
so is that different than being
Well, no. So it depends on the type of tenancy. So farming tenancies take a variety. You've got the basics of a grazing let. You've got your type of tenancy, which essentially is less than 365 days. So a grazing agreement has to be...
That's what all mine are.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
well then, fine, Cammy. I'm quite versed in those. It can't be for more than a year. It can't be for a year or more. And then you've got short limited duration tenancies, which would be up to 5 years or 5 years. And then you've got sort of there was limited duration tenancies, but the legislation was updated and you've now got more of the modern limited duration tenancy. And then you've got the sort of halcyon of all type of tenancies as your secure tenancy.
Yeah.
Like your 1991
The Holy
Act
Grail.
tenancy, the Holy Grail. That is the one that if you've got a tenancy, that's the kind of tenancy you want to have. So I advise on maybe... most type of tenancy situations, but not the secure tenancies. I would tend to spend any clients that have got a particular issue about secure tenancies to another chap that I use for specialist advice, because it is such a specialist area and there's so much legislation in this area and the devil is in the detail. And there's been lots of legislation in this area in the last few years about assigning tenancies and surrendering tenancies and putting your tenancy onto the market. And it's such a specific process that I do tend to just...
And am I right in saying that, like, just about every landlord just now in agent is trying to get people out of secure tenancies if they can.
Well, if you're a landlord and if you want to get a tenant out, then you would try and get them out of the secure tenancy. But they can't really do that. I mean, usually, if you've got a secure
they make them an offer. Like,
yes.
I'm not saying they
Why
don't
do
force
they
them
want
out. Well, you imagine if you're a millionaire, like secure tenancies make no sense to me. Can I just say, and playing devil's advocate, like great to everyone that's got them. But if I was a landowner, like, no, I know your dad touched on it, that the reason, Iona's dad, that is for anyone listening, touched on it that back post-war, nobody wanted to farm and it was hard to get people in the farms. So it was a way of encouraging them in, was this security of tenancy. And perhaps back then you had more wealthy landowners than we do now. I don't know. But a lot of these big estates now aren't as cash rich as they probably used to be.
Yeah.
But for anyone that doesn't know what a secure tenancy is, maybe I should get... Do you want to explain what a secure tenancy is, just very briefly?
Well, a secure tenancy is a tenancy which essentially gives you, well, at the present time, more or less gives you the right to pass that tenancy, the right to farm that property down through the generations. You know what I mean? So if you've got a tenancy in place, the main attraction of a secure tenancy is that, you can leave it essentially to your next of kin, to your son, to your daughter. I mean, so it passes down to the next generation. So it gives you that secure right to farm the land, not only yourself, but to the next generation. Whereas, a grazing right doesn't pass on. A short limited duration tenancy essentially, wouldn't pass on. Yeah. So it's the security that it gives you, but it's a creature of the, 1991 Act legislation.
But an interesting thing, obviously secure, it's in the name, but the landowner cannot get that farm back.
So no,
unless he makes you a huge offer.
So there's a process. So if the farmer...
It doesn't have to be a huge offer, but unless he makes you an offer, you could sell it to him or come out of it, but he can't give you a notice to evict, like you could maybe with a house let.
Well, no, he can. You could serve notice, but you would usually need to have grounds to set.
If you pay your rent and stay within your terms, they can't kick you out.
No.
And how long is a secure tenancy normally?
Forever.
Oh, right.
So that's what I'm saying, it can pass down.
There's no date on it. It's literally forever. There'll be some of them over 100 years old. Well, pushing 100 years old, I would think, some of them.
Well, just because of the way it comes down through the generations, you see. And
so why is that attractive to landowners rather than just selling?
It's not now though. It's
Not.
terrible.
Right. Okay.
So you can't now create a new secure tenancy. So that's why following the introduction of the Agricultural Holdings Scotland Act 2003. There's nothing you can't effectively create a new secure tenancy. So the best you can put in place, if you were a landlord and you wanted to create a new tenancy with somebody, then you can enter into a limited duration tenancy, which can be for, it could be 10, 15, you could agree to
you could do 20
for 20 years. You know what I mean? You could
20 years.
totally can agree to that finite period of time. But you can't now create a secure tenancy there effectively no longer, essentially because of the security.
What's madness?
Which
it would be
gets,
madness. You imagine you own £2 million worth of land, but you can't get it.
Yeah, that's mad.
Do you know what I mean? You own that you own most of these estates own millions, tens of millions of land, but you imagine you own £2 million worth of land, a £2 million farm, you own it, but you don't.
Sell it.
You can't touch it. You can't do anything. Even if you're getting like cash strapped and all that, the best you could do is maybe do like some sort of bridging loan on the promise of selling it after you pay the farmer out. So it's like I can totally understand why both landowners are trying to, and I'm like, some farmers are like, Cammy, whose side are you on here? Like, but I'm on the side of common sense. It's like, why would any landowner do that now? And I get it, and it's all right. It's crap for folk like me that would love a secure tenancy. Yeah. It's not as good. But there is still some opportunities with your 10 and 15, and the landowner has more security and he can get it back within that. They might have to wait 15 years, but there's an end in sight. Whereas with secure tenancies, it's just...
And you wouldn't enter into it. I mean, the landowner's obviously looked at his different options, and for whatever reason, the farm's a good asset, he doesn't want to sell, and it'll be a good income for them. So they'll have done their homework, and therefore they'll have decided on whatever's the correct vehicle for them. And that's why your short limited duration tenancies are essentially quite short, though. They're only 5 years or can be less than 5 years.
Yeah.
And then the modern limited duration tenancy, or the limited duration tenancy, essentially allows you to put something in place which probably is a bit more meaningful for the tenant. It gives you a chance to actually farm the ground and invest money in the ground. You can have it for that fixed period of time. Gives you a bit more certainty.
I mean, if, for example, if there's a steading in a house involved, a 5 year tenancy is almost a waste of time because...
you don't want to plug too much money into it.
Well, you may as well just have a seasonal let.
Yeah.
It's there's no real difference because you're not going to invest on over a 5 year period where, even 10's pretty short, but 10, 15, 20 years, it's worth ploughing a field and
absolutely.
Improving the soils and putting some real money into it. And of course, a secure tenancy, the other benefit is anything you spend, well, depends, I think, with some of the terms, but say you build a shed, etc.
Yeah.
If you ever come out that tenancy,
Yeah,
any
maybe.
tenants improvements
Yep.
get paid to you. But the owner has to pay you, which is another benefit for that. It's a good deal. It's a good deal. So if you build a shed, when you come out
You
of that,
get paid
the
for
owner has to pay you for that shed you've built and used for 30 years. Albeit it's depreciating.
It depreciates,
It
yes,
depreciates.
Yep.
Right,
It
okay.
depreciates. But so that's another, because there's a real example very close to you that I had a look at myself,
Yes.
which I still believe is the only example of its kind in the country, unless you've heard of another.
I can't quote another one off the top of my head. I'm not.
No.
That's the only
So,
one I know definitely
yes,
happened.
and I'm not saying I hear a lot of the gossip, but folk know I'm desperate to get on, so that we hear about a lot of those things. So the scenario I'm talking about was a secure tenancy
Yep.
was available to buy,
Yep.
which is unheard of,
Yep.
like unbelievable actually. And essentially this was a farm, I'm not going to say the farm, but anyone in Ayrshire will know the farm. Incredible farm, incredible
Yep,
steading.
first
The
class.
previous farmer had the place immaculate. It was
Yep, all
perfect
credit
for
to
us,
Yep.
perfect for us. But the problem with that is, I'm not saying I couldn't have got a lender, but it's unprecedented. So when I started inquiring about getting finance for it, and just for reference, to buy the secure tenancy, you're essentially buying the tenant's improvements. And
Okay.
and the the tenant put the value on it essentially, and I thought it was a fair value, but it was valued at roughly 400,000, between 400,000 and 500,000.
Right,
There
so
would be a procedure though to work out that in the legislation, Cammy, there's a process. So in terms of the process, the tenant would have to offer the farm, or the tenant would have to speak to the landlord first to see whether the landlord wanted to buy him out, and then there's a valuation
incredible
process.
bit.
So the landlord obviously said no, we don't want to buy you
That,
out.
which is incredible.
And then there's a valuation process. So the legislation sets down how the valuation of the farm is achieved, so that you then know essentially what the valuation of the tenancy is. So I would assume that valuation which was obtained would have been your base for the price guide, essentially, that was put on the tenancy, I would assume.
But I would say that's fine when you go to the landlord. You have to sit by those rules.
Yeah,
But when you put it to the open market, you
yeah.
can put any price you like on it.
Well, that's true. Well,
And it went
yes,
for a
that's
lot
true.
more than it was asked
that's
for.
better. So
It
I
went
say
for
the price
100.
guide, emphasis on the word guide.
Yeah. So I believe it went for nearly 500. It certainly went for more than it was on for. So we wouldn't have got it anyway, even if I got the finance in place. But the crazy thing with this is that the landlord was offered and chose not to take it, which is unheard of.
I don't understand that.
The guys maybe, who knows? It's not for
Yeah.
us to
No, no,
speculate.
no.
But anyway, that was the incredible thing of that story, and what an opportunity. Like, we went and we looked at a place and like, this is a dream, very close to where we are. But just looking into finance, speaking to banks and rural finance, and it's unprecedented because
so you can't get security, so you can't
Yeah,
get
there's no
finance. You
secu-
can't, like, so if you get a secured loan from the bank, like, so if you own a farm or own a house, you can go and get a mortgage, you can get a
You can
loan.
secure it
off
against
the
an
back of
asset.
it,
Yeah.
But the banks won't give you loan finance for a tenancy.
yeah.
And obviously,
Well, they said potential. They were all like humming and hawing about it as a secure tenancy. It's like one of the most valuable. It's one of the most valuable non-assets,
Yeah.
non-physical asset. It probably is the
Yep.
most valuable non-physical asset you can get in farming. So they're like they were all talking up like there's potential there if we speak
Yep.
to X and Y and Z
Yep.
and we put a proper plan together. And to be fair, it was I got speaking to somebody else who said actually I think it'll go for this amount rather than the amount you're thinking, and it kind of made us think, well, what's the point in doing all this work? And fortunately, it did go. Fortunately, they were right enough. It did go for a lot more, but it was like unprecedented. It'd be great if anyone's listening to this and have heard of another example of that. Please drop us an email and let us know that, because I think this may be the only one in the whole country. And yeah, it ended up going for, as we say, that amount of money. And the farm itself, if we say the tenants improvements were there at that 400,000-ish mark, the probably farm itself was worth about 2 million. Would that be fair in that area? You're very close to there. Maybe more than that, maybe.
yeah, I mean,
You're just speculating, but it's just to give
Yeah,
folk an
yeah,
example
yeah.
of a percentage
Yes,
of, you're buying a
it's
lease.
it's very good ground and it's got a very good setup. It's a tremendous farm.
Oh,
so
and you
yeah,
turn it into a dairy immediately. Well, it
absolutely.
has been a
Was it?
dairy. Yeah.
So see, when you buy that secure tenancy, are you on top of that paying rent every month?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But the
right,
rent
okay.
was a pittance. Like, secure.
Like, how much would a rent be for that?
I'm not allowed to say. I shouldn't
well,
say. I shouldn't really say.
Or
But
would it not be public? When
anyone, to be fair, anyone that applied for it got to see what the rent was, but it's unfair on the people that are in it now, I feel.
of course, because
Uh-huh.
then people would know what
Yeah,
they're
well, everybody will know the farm I'm talking about.
Right, okay.
So it's unfair of me to say, but it's a pittance. Like,
Right, okay.
like pennies, like a fraction of what I pay for seasonal lets.
Right,
Put it this way, the subsidy would more than cover it.
Right, okay.
So there's an example of how. But that's standard with secure tenancies. Generally speaking, secure tenancies rents are much lower than the more modern MLDTs. But yeah, so that was an incredible example and one that we just never see. And hey, if I saw one again, I'd be all over it.
A great opportunity.
It was, and well done to the guys that got it.
Absolutely, yes.
Good on them jumping. Good on them
people.
jumping on the opportunity and hey, great, brilliant. So I think we managed to discuss that without getting ourselves in too much bother. That's probably a good time to take a little break and hear from one of our sponsors.
Most foragers don't supply sheep and cattle with enough cobalt, copper, iodine and selenium, critical to digestion, immunity, reproduction and growth. When it comes to supplementation, there's a danger of under or oversupply. But when bolusing with Animax Tracesure, you can be sure every animal has enough for up to 6 months in one single application. Animax, giving what it takes.
I've been loving this actually.
Yeah, so interesting.
It's like I'm getting free advice.
Well, you are.
Yeah. It's good, and we got a podcast to put out as well.
Maybe they'll wait for the invoice to come through.
Yeah.
Hope it's not too boring.
This podcast cost me 250 quid. That's what I don't know. That's why I'm looking at the time. I'm like, oh god, I've got 5 minutes left. Right, I'm going to spend my last tenner on this question. So the final one I want to ask you, and it's an interesting one, is tenants' rights in regards to a farmer selling a farm. And there's no lease on the farm, but someone claims tenants' rights. Do you know anything about that?
So, tenants' rights tends to be people that are pre-2003 Act. So it's somebody, again, that's trying to claim that they've been on the ground since, say, for the last 20 years. So you need a bit more meat in the bone there, Cam, in terms of what they're trying to claim. Because if you're just on a piece of ground, you've been on it for the last couple of years, and then you decide you're going to claim tenants' rights, well, the Agricultural Holding Scotland Act 2003 will not, recognise that. That was one of the big drivers of the 2003 Act, was to take away this, people trying to claim tenants' rights.
Brilliant.
But if you were on a piece of ground, say, for the last 20 years, and your right to occupy or right to be on the ground predates the Agricultural Holding Scotland Act 2003, then you need to look at the circumstances of, how long you've been on, has there been any break in that, have you been paying rent the whole time? You need to look at the circumstances, and you may be able to try and claim some sort of right. But again, I caveat these, it's a case by case, and because it's so specific and they can get litigious, as I say, I always pass them to a chap.
So why do we have to have, if it's post 2003, they've taken away this claiming tenants' rights thing, why do we have to have a break in seasonal lets?
I'm thinking about the bigger picture of tenants' rights and trying to claim what we call security of tenure. You can't claim security of tenure anymore if your occupation postdates the 2003 Act. But say you're on with a grazing let and you don't actually vacate and you stay on, and you could try and then potentially claim that you've got a greater right than a grazing agreement. You know what I mean? If you're on, you're still on, you don't vacate, for whatever reason. Or one of the more common ones is you're on a piece of ground in terms of a short limited duration tenancy, and say you're on and you're allowed to be on for a year, but you don't vacate for whatever reason, you're still carrying on and you still then pay rent, and you don't vacate, it can effectively become a 5-year, or it can become a longer short limited duration tenancy. So you can enhance the right that you have by doing certain things or not doing certain things, or somebody not serving notice on you, but you can't get security of tenure anymore.
Yeah, but see those things, and the people, and I don't, if anybody's listening to this, I don't mind if you're offended, but the people that do those things, right, they make it a nightmare for people like me.
Because then the landlords then become
nobody's
suspicious.
any trust.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Because there's these greedy people and untrustworthy people that are they'll say it's a seasonal let, and then all of a sudden they're claiming more.
Yeah,
and it ruins it for everyone.
Yeah, no,
and I don't understand why the law. Why won't they change? Why did they allow that to be a law?
Well, I think it's just in terms of when you have a tenancy, you've got to have a set process for ending a tenancy. So, giving notice or whatever the relevant step is. And if you don't do that, or if you fall foul of the process, then that's when you can then fall foul. There's got to be consequences. So the legislation tries to preempt consequences, but it's far better if everybody just, if it's a gentleman's, a scenario where people both sides
there's
of
not
the
enough
fence
there's
do
not
what
enough
they're meant to
gentlemen in the
do.
world. That's the problem. But so here's a scenario then: if you have a verbal agreement with someone for a seasonal let, 350 weeks of the year, verbal agreement, nothing written down,
You should have it in writing. I would recommend that. But
No, but who's it better for then? Surely it's better for the landlord if there's
Yes.
nothing in writing.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's good
No, you
then.
won't know. Well, you won't know if you're the landlord. You'd want something in writing, so you're very clear about what your
Well,
scenario
yes,
is.
if it's in writing, but surely it's good for the landlord too if there's nothing in writing, because then.
They've got to prove others. But then if you're paying rent, and it's vacant possession. Well, as long as you're getting vacant possession.
But if you're paying
Cammy.
rent, the landlord says, "Oh, you know, it was a summer grazing."
Well, yes, it depends what you're trying to prove. So you're the tenant trying to say that you've got rights type thing, but there's nothing in writing. Well, from the landlord's perspective, it's better to have something in writing there.
But of course, if it's black and white, that it's a seasonal, that's good.
So that's
But
what I always say. Black and white is far, like
yeah,
putting
of course,
it in writing.
of course it is.
If you can
But
take
surely,
anything from that,
if
put
there's
it
a
in writing.
verbal thing, the tenant has no legs,
Well,
no
but
ground
then-
to stand on.
But then sometimes there maybe
Literally.
was something
Plenty.
in place at the beginning and then it's been lost. That sometimes happens and people don't update their agreements, etc. And it's the actings of the party. But essentially, if you're dealing with land, there should be some kind of written agreement in place. That's the best scenario. Otherwise, anything is open to one man's argument against another man's argument, and it leaves you in a grey area sometimes. So I always say, potentially for both parties as well, then you know where you stand. You're far better to have something in writing.
Yeah, listen, obviously, yeah, black and white's great, but it just winds me up so much because I know of examples of that happening, and it's like it crushes it for the rest of us.
That's why people become reticent about, your landlords become reticent about freeing up ground to rent out. Cam, you're 100% right, because they worry about potentially what the backlash could be if they don't terminate the tenancy in the proper manner, or if somebody does try to claim something which wasn't obviously intended at the outset. So it is a difficult one.
And someone like myself who's got to manage breaks and ground all over the place. Like, so you've got to stagger your leases and stuff because one place is to be clear for a week at this time. And another place is to be clear for a week at a different time.
It's a nightmare.
No, it is a nightmare.
And it's all
especially with
caused
sheep,
by dishonesty.
Yeah.
Like, I have to do that because of dishonest people.
Well,
That's the reality.
Well, it's just making sure that, that from the landlord's perspective, that there is effectively seen to be a break. There's a period of
Yeah,
vacant
because of
possession.
dishonest people.
Well, but people trying to claim that they've got more than they actually have.
Yeah, dishonest people. Yeah, you can say it. You can say it. How else would you describe it?
Well, see, that's the joys of being a lawyer. It's always the shades of grey, Cammy, isn't it?
Because you're defending. She's defending the other guy. She's
It's
squeezing
always
as
the
much.
shades of grey,
You've got
Cammy,
to
that's
watch.
the
You're going to
problem.
offend some clients here.
It's shades of grey, and that's the problem. And that's why, as I say, back to square one, put it in writing at the beginning.
Yeah.
Everybody knows where they stand. Best advice I can give you.
Totally. No, listen. I think that's good. And get a will.
And
We're
get a
gonna. Will you book me in?
Yes, absolutely, Cammy.
I mean, do I actually need to come in, or can I just say give it to Lizzie?
Can I
do it now? Can I do it just now and Iona will sign it and we'll just
absolutely. That's
I'll be the
done
witness.
dusted. Yeah,
give it to Lizzie. Give it to Lizzie.
all to Lizzie.
Make sure she doesn't take it to Devon. The only
caveat.
the only rule is it must stay here.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like an Adam Sandler film. It's like she can have all the money, but she must spend it before she goes back home. It must go to it must go to Scotland's tax coffers. Ideal. No, that's good. And get married was the other bit of advice you said. Farmers should get married.
Well,
Avoid inheritance tax.
Well, no, if you're looking at it from an inheritance tax perspective, then getting married's good, just purely because you can leave it all to your spouse and you don't suffer tax. But farmers, as I say, it's agricultural property relief that is the big saviour for farmers.
If you're actively farming.
If you're actively farming.
So I appreciate
No, you're fine.
I'm
It's
into
okay,
my second
great.
hour here. I know it's all getting billed. It's fine.
Oh, no, not at all, not at all.
But
Delighted to be here.
you've reminded me of another thing I meant to ask though.
Yep.
Was that you mentioned this agricultural
Property
relief.
Yeah.
What about if you pass? So you're saying, and there's the thing, and partly this is maybe an issue why there's so many older farmers. Not that it's an issue, older farmers, but your average age of farmers is so high because it actually makes more sense
So
for them to.
it's very tax efficient to leave the farm in the will. So
Yeah.
you can leave the farm in the will and it gives you the best inheritance tax and capital
So why
gains
would
tax
anyone
position.
not do that?
Because I think, other people, believe that it's good to potentially transfer the farm during life, and therefore it's good to encourage the son, and they want it to get it down to the next generation. And there's other considerations. You've got succession planning. There's other reasons why you would maybe want to get it down to the next generation.
And there's the thing with regards to 7 years. Is
yes,
that the other
potentially.
route to do it? To pass it on and live 7
you
years?
can transfer during your lifetime. Then if you live 7 years, it falls completely out with your estate. So as long as you live 7 years, it doesn't come back into your estate. But if you were to die within the 7 years, as long as your son and you're still involved in the family business and your son's farming and everybody's, you've got a farm in the farmhouse and farm in the farm, your son's in the cottage, you should still tick all the boxes for actively farming, and it would still be covered by agricultural property relief.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the big saviour for farmers, is agricultural property relief, and you can get business property relief as well for the businesses, like for your share in the partnership or share in the company, whatever, depending on how you trade. But it's the key thing is, speak to your solicitor, agricultural solicitor, and take advice about these things, because it's all good to know exactly how you are set up and understand how it works in your scenario, and making sure that you are structured as best you possibly can be to take advantage of all the reliefs.
Interesting. No,
Yeah,
listen.
really interesting.
So much good stuff there. So much.
I know, I feel like I want to listen to it back already.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? To like,
Because you said it so fast, you missed it all.
So slow me down.
I'm
Please
like-
slow me down.
No, it's good.
No, it's
Honestly,
so good.
Yeah.
I think, and that's another thing folk feel that they're getting their money's worth,
Yes.
because they're getting 2 hours of information in a 1 hour podcast.
But as I say, if I can give any sort of, message, is it's never early enough to speak to your solicitor, never early enough to think about succession planning, and to review your structuring in terms of your business and how the farm's held. Take advice, and particularly please from an agricultural solicitor that essentially has an understanding of why you want to do certain things.
And now, someone like yourself, would you, if someone phoned you, would that initial phone call about the circumstances be free?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, Cammy, as I say, I'm a farmer's daughter, Cammy. I know it's pounds and pence, and it's so absolutely very happy to speak to anybody in the first instance, and then take it from there.
Because I've phoned you before
Yes,
for
and
advice.
I've never charged you. I've
I
never
didn't get
charged
a
you for
bill.
any advice I've given
Didn't
you.
get it. As soon as she said something about billing information, I'm like, sorry.
I think I'm quite reasonable. I would like to think I'm
No,
reasonably reasonable.
You were very, very helpful. So that's good to know. And are you always actively looking for more work?
Yeah, always
Fair
looking
to
for
say.
keen to build my business.
We'll put your email. How do you want just the practice phone
I
number?
can give practice phone number, and my email address would be ideal, Cammy.
Okay, so we'll put that on the screen there. And if anyone wants to speak to Margo or one of our colleagues,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
get their wills done, she'll do you a good rate, and then she'll cream it on the other side when you die. Okay.
or indeed buying or selling farms. That's my kind of big thing, is buying and selling farms, because
Yes.
obviously that's where the agri bit ties in. That's what I do essentially on a daily basis. The wills, the succession planning ties in round about that, but my core thing
Do you
is
give
buying
any
and selling.
advice on finance? No.
I don't give advice because we're not authorised to provide financial advice, but we work with all the big high street banks that obviously provide typically the finance to folk when they're buying a farm.
Do you work with Oxbury?
Oh yeah, well yeah.
Yeah, because I was looking at a wee bit recently.
They're doing a lot at the minute. Everybody seems to have a quote for Oxbury.
but low deposit.
Which is great.
Yeah, I think they were 25%. Quote me here, I'm getting into
Oh,
it. But
fab.
the number I was told was certainly 25%, whereas other similar lenders were about 40%. So for somebody like myself who's
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Gives you a foot in the door.
doesn't have the
that's
cash
great.
to go 40%, it was an option, but unfortunately I don't have the cash to do 25%. But we're getting closer every day. We're getting closer every day. This time next year, and of course, it'll be yourself that sorts it for me. You heard it here
Cammy.
first. So just discounted.
I know exactly to say, yeah. I'll be getting more than 2 hoodies at this.
Secure a discount. Done. Right. Do you need a discount for anything, Iona?
I mean, I've not got a will. I've not got a will.
No, you've got nothing to leave, so yeah. Why bother?
My flat,
Well, absolutely. If you want anything, yeah. Women
that's
of
it. Leave
wealth,
somebody a lot of
my
debt.
car.
Yeah, bought during the boom, and now it's going back in price all the time.
No, it's
it's not.
rising
Creswick,
every
innit?
day.
Oh, no, it's
Straven.
Straven.
Oh yeah, I'm just waiting for them to put in a train station.
Straven's a good place.
Straiten's
Once HE2 gets there or HS2 gets
It's going
there,
to be
worth a
unreal.
fortune.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Good. There we go. So right, we're all getting wills done. That's it's been fantastic. We're going to conclude the podcast there, unless you have anything else you'd like to. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Well, I think you've been
quite
very,
happy.
very thorough there. It's been great. Fantastic having you on. We'd just like to thank our sponsors, Crystalyx and Animax, for supporting the podcast. Obviously fantastic. I'm still waiting, Graham, if you're listening, I'm still waiting on my Animax boluses for here. What I'm going to do is use them all, then leave the empty boxes there. And I'll do the same. What I'm going to do, I'm going to do the exact same with these Crystalyx tubs. I'm going to start swapping them for empties, obviously. Who would know? Nobody will know.
Makes sense.
Yeah, just don't. If somebody opens the door and the draft blows them all over, it'll be fine. So thanks very much to them for supporting the podcast. I've been Cammy.
I've been Iona.
And we're both fed by farmers.